Welcome to Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm MaryLee Moulton, a member of the League and your host. Each program we talk about important public policy issues, and we hope you'll discuss these issues, and at election time you will be ready and willing to vote. Our guest today is Peggy Adair, our highly unpaid lobbyist for the League at the Nebraska Legislature, and we're going to be talking about the Unicameral and proposed legislation this session. Thanks for being with us, Peggy.
You're welcome. I am glad to be here.
Great. Why don't we start off by talking about the session itself. This is the long session of the legislature. Can you talk about the difference in sessions?
Sure. This is it's the 106th legislature, but it's the first session. Mm-hmm. So it's a 90 working day session. It will go into early June. The second session then would be next year, and that would just go kind of through April, and that would be a 60-day session. Okay. Difference being the long session, they'll be choosing, or they already have, chosen their leaders, and they have to do the budget, and they have to make up the rules. Okay. And interestingly enough, the legislature makes up their own rules. Mm-hmm. Only what we have in the Constitution is what they go by, and then every 2 years they make up their own rules. And the rules are voted on by the senators, and then those become the rules for that session.
Now, last session, that was a bit of a problem. It took a long time to get the rules.
Yes.
This session has been much quicker.
Yes. Yes. Last session, well, we had a governor who had never held political office before, and he runs a business. And there are folks who think that one can run government the way one runs a business. The problem being that in a business, you're the boss, and what you say goes. In the government, you need to work with other people, and you need to negotiate and compromise, and those things can become difficult for a person who is used to having his own way or her own way. So the newly elected governor decided that he wanted to have things done his way and tried to shuffle in people into positions that would do his bidding. And actually, this was in 2017 that we had the famous Gang of 27, where there were 27 folks who got together ahead of time and decided who they would vote for leaders, and that the leaders would be of a particular political party and would kind of follow along what the governor wanted. And it was very controversial at the time, mm-hmm. And I think what has happened between then and now is people kind of regained their sense of shame. Mm-hmm. They had no shame then, and the public was rather upset with that. And it really didn't work. We had people that were in leadership positions who were freshman senators, didn't really know what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And they kind of stumbled through. And I think people saw that once we tried that method, it wasn't working very well. And so they kind of went back to a little more stable method that they're doing this year.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing that they were able to get the rules passed so quickly, because there are 739 bills filed for this session. That's a lot of bills. Can you give us an overview of how bills move through the legislature and how each bill in the legislature receives a public hearing, which is kind of unique to Nebraska too?
Sure. And back in the bad old days, mm-hmm. before term limits, actually in a session like this, a long session, they would have about 1,100 bills. And reason being that if you had somebody who'd been in political office for 20 years, 25 years, mm-hmm. as some of them were, they had been there so long, they had such institutional knowledge that they could handle a lot of bills, and so they would introduce a lot of bills. Whereas now, because of term limits, I think we had like 18 new senators this time, and when they're new, they're cautious about introducing legislation, which is a good thing, right? Because they want to learn the ropes before they jump into it. So that's why 700, yeah, that's a lot, but it's not what it used to be in the bad old days.
Okay. Now, what have you observed so far in the public hearings that they have had? Because they started having public hearings about a week or so ago.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that we are very fortunate in Nebraska that we have a unicameral and that we have public hearings for every bill, because we are the only state that does that. where other states will have, they have the two-chamber legislatures, much like the Washington, D.C. does. We only have one chamber, but that one chamber requires that every bill, every one of those 700 bills has a public hearing. And that means that ordinary citizens can come in and they can support or oppose or discuss and participate. And that has been, since it became a Unicam in the 40s, that has been a good thing. What I have observed this session is that more and more ordinary citizens are coming in relation to lobbyists, where in the bad old days it would be mostly lobbyists who were lining up and talking about bills. My observation so far this session has been that a lot of people are feeling the need to participate civically, and it's a good thing.
So if you're a person sitting out there in the audience and you want to come up to Lincoln and have your say, how do you actually go about doing that?
The hardest part is getting there because people are working. They got childcare. Just the issue of transportation, 500 miles for your 3 minutes of fame, because that's pretty much what you have is 3 minutes to discuss your issue. But the process is pretty simple. If you have a bill that you're interested in, let's go with the Cannabis Bill because everybody's interested in that, which is LB 110. You look up the bill. And you can read the bill online, and if you have some concerns about it, or you're opposing it or supporting it or whatever, you just come and you state your piece.
Do you have to sign in first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is a sign-in sheet that will have you do that, and it says you support or oppose. And if you're speaking on your own behalf, they ask that, or if you're speaking on behalf of a corporation or an organization, then you sign in as a lobbyist speaking on another's behalf. Two things are very important for anybody who comes to speak at a public hearing. Number one is tell your story. Everybody has a story, and that really helps the senators to empathize with your cause. And then the other thing is be factual. If you have some statistics or whatever that you want to present, that's very useful for the senators to have, and be honest and tell the truth.
Now, do all the people speaking pro go one after another, or do they alternate pro and con? How do they do that?
That's an excellent question. The senators have everybody who is in support of the bill come and speak first. Then everybody who opposes the bill, they come and speak. And then we'll have neutral testimony. And that might be a government agency who, it would be okay one way or the other with a bill that just has some kind of concerns about it, but they really don't have enough to support or oppose. They just want to come and speak in that neutral position.
Now, the senators themselves, they can pick a priority bill. How does that work?
Yes, they get one priority bill, the senators do. The speaker gets, and it varies from year to year what the speaker gets. I think this year they're going with 5 for the speaker. Don't quote me on the 5 because I'm not sure. And then the committees get 2 priority bills. And the reason one will pick a priority bill is, 700 bills. It's a lot of bills. We know they're not all going to get passed. If we're lucky, maybe 200 max. So in order to get your bill at the top of the pile, that's where you want to choose a priority and say, this is the bill more than anything else that I'm really concerned about. And if nothing else happens, I want this one to be heard. And the speaker will put that bill at the top of the pile once you've chosen as your priority.
Okay. Now, how does the League decide what their priority is going to be, the League of Women Voters of Nebraska?
That's always a challenging process, too. First of all, we have to have a position on a particular thing. And I will just use this as an example. This isn't happening this year, but it's a prime example of you can say stuff when you're speaking on behalf of the League, and you might say something different if you're speaking on your own behalf. The League has a position of winner take all as far as the Electoral College goes. In other words, you don't divide up, as Nebraska does, you don't divide up between the congressional districts.
Right, yeah, the one electoral vote that is generally in play in Nebraska.
Exactly. But the league opposes that. So whenever that comes up in Nebraska where they say, well, we want to make sure that we have at least, that one thing that's at large, we cannot testify because the league has a different position. But our individual members, if they choose to do that as citizens, they can certainly come up and talk about that. So the league has to have a position. We have to follow that position. And, we have positions at the national and the state and the local level. We all get together in a room and we duke it out. We'll duke it out this Saturday. Yes. Because everybody has their issues that they're very concerned about and very passionate about. We have a lot of strong personalities in the league, which is a good thing. But we get in there and we duke it out and we decide which ones we want to really focus on for the year.
Can you give the audience an idea of what in the past the league has made priorities? What types of bills?
Well, it varies again from year to year, and I'll tell a story about that. When I first joined the league, I was very interested in social policy issues. And that year, I was very new, and that year there was a list of the priority bills that the league had put out, the state league, and the majority of them were water bills, which was good. But there were no social policy bills. And I was a little perturbed about that, and so I called the president and I asked her, I said, well, all these water bills, well, that's great, but why no social policy bills? And she said, well, we're a volunteer organization and we have to have, first of all, we have to follow the policy, but we also have to have a person who is willing to step forward as a volunteer and follow these bills. Would you like to do that? Mm-hmm. And so I did. I said, okay, I will do that.
And so that's how it all started.
So I became the social policy director, and then I became the vice president of action, and then I became the president, so they suck you in. But it's a good thing.
Okay, great. Now, how can a voter actually track a bill that they're interested in?
The website for our legislature is very user-friendly. It's nebraskalegislature.gov. Okay. And on the home page, you can go on the upper right-hand side. There is LB number, that's legislative bill number, and you can put the number in there, and you can search that way. Okay. If you don't know the number, on the left side of the home page, it says Search Bills and Laws, and you can actually go on there, and you can search a bill by the number, by the date of introduction, by the introducing senator. So suppose your senator is Senator Bowles and you want to see what all she has introduced, you can do it that way. You can also do it by keywords. So if you're interested in wind energy, you can write wind energy, and all of the bills that are in this session that have been introduced will pop up. Some of them will be more down the line than the others, and you just kind of have to skim through the bills, but that's how you can find them.
Okay, terrific. Now, I know the league was very excited to find out that there is no voter ID bill this session. Why do you think that happened?
Yes, we waited until bated breath until the last day because we were sure something would pop up. Everything changes. Everything changes. And every year we get senators who leave and senators who come. And every year the tenor of the legislature changes depending on the leadership and depending on the senators that are there. The senator who was the head of the Government, Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, Senator Moranti, was there for a long time and really controlled the issues, and he was a strong supporter of voter ID. So anybody that that had that same persuasion, they knew that they could put a bill up and that he would go for it. Well, he has now been bumped upstairs to treasurer, so he is no longer in the legislature. And so that's a piece of it. Mm-hmm. Another piece of it, I think, too, is the government committee has become less hard right, more centrist. I feel like our legislature in general has kind of become more centrist. I think that hard right edge that they had 2 years ago was painful on a number of levels for a number of entities. And so we have become a little more centrist, and those issues are not as important as they were 2 years ago.
Now, following on that kind of change, it seems that the approach to mental health care seems to be changing in the legislature. Could you tell us about what you're seeing there?
Yeah. Mental health, our country in general has been behind in the care of mental health issues for 100 years, until the Affordable Care Act came along and said, you need to, if you're going to care for a person, you need to care for that whole person, that mental health is health. And so that was the beginning of it, and now our state also, I think, is realizing that when you're talking about people who are using drugs, they're using drugs not because they're bad people, they're using drugs because they're in pain and they want to feel better. And so there is an understanding that mental health issues are not because somebody chose to do that. It's because they're having issues with their brain. And we need to have a little more compassion for folks and treat them in a different way. There's the war on drugs is a war on people. There's a couple of really good ones. There's one, Senator Moorfeld has a bill, LB 568, and it has to do with mental health first aid training for teachers, so that teachers in schools can recognize when a child is in crisis, and that teacher can reach out to appropriate people and get help for that child right away. This is a really good one. Senator Bowles, LB 247, has introduced the Advanced Mental Health Care Directive. And what that is is similar to a health care directive, where you say in advance, if you have a chronic condition, and you know that you're going to have maybe some psychotic episodes,
Like
you know
schizophrenia or something
exactly,
like
you
that.
know, or maybe you're bipolar, and you know things are going to happen, then you can, in advance, you can say, well, if this does happen to me, this is how I would like my care to be handled. I don't want to be in a locked facility, or I do, or I don't want to see this psychiatrist, I want to see this one. So you are in control in advance of your mental health care. I think that's a super bill. Shouldn't cost a lot of money, and hopefully that one would move forward.
Okay. And it seems that mental health seems to be tied to gun safety too, because I know that LB 120 was requiring teacher and school staff to receive training on behavior and mental health. And LB 58 is that Extreme Risk Protection Order Act, the red flag bill, which you've seen come up in a lot of states, where, you know, if something's really wrong, that the police can step in a mental health crisis, something like that, to remove guns. Do you think that type of strategy will be more productive for gun safety in the state?
I think that's a bad avenue to go down.
Okay.
Reason being that, again, it stigmatizes mental health. Most people who are mentally ill are not violent. Most people who are mentally ill, actually, they are more likely to become victims of violence than not. So I think anything that ties those two issues together is dangerous.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, our country has too many guns. And we've had it for a long time, and this is, it's a complicated, complex issue. It's going to take a long time to kind of straighten that out. But the issue is not mental health, the issue is guns.
Now, there are several bills that specifically address women's issues. There is LB 13, which is the breast pump tax exemption, LB 154, that authorized the study to improve reporting on investigation of missing Native American women, LB 170, the tax exemption on feminine hygiene products, 311, the family medical leave, and LB 690, the healthy pregnancies for incarcerated women. Can you talk a little about these bills and their prospects, and also the women senators that introduced them?
Yeah, it's fantastic that we have 14 women out of 49 senators. That's more than we've ever had. The max was 13 in a couple of years past. That's a good thing, but we're only about, I think, in 26th place in the United States as far as female legislators. So, we have a ways to go. And of those 14 women, only 2 of them actually are chairing a standing committee. which is only, what, 1% of those who are in leadership positions. So we have a ways to go, but we are making progress. And I think a piece of that was part of the 2018 elections, the cat and mouse story. So you have a bunch of mice, and they are the population. And there's a cat, and they voted for this cat. He's a white cat. He's a big cat. And the mice decide that, he's really not representing us very well. So the tabby cat steps up and says, you guys, I'll take care of you. And so they vote for the tabby cat. And the tabby cat still does things that mice are not really happy about, stealing their cheese and things like that. So then the mice figure out, you know what, we keep electing cats. We need to elect a mouse. And that's kind of what happens. So then they elect a mouse. And I think in this last election cycle, women realized that, you can vote for this guy or this guy or this guy, but I need to step up and run myself.
And a lot of young women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really great to see.
Yes. And people of color have stepped up. I know that, I'm from Oklahoma, and they had a teacher walkout this last year, a 3-week walkout, and teachers realized that they have to run for public office, and they have done so. So again, I think there has been a newfound interest in civic participation, and I think a piece of that has definitely shown in our own state legislature. So as far as the bills, the breast pump bill, that might make it because it's only a deficit of $200,000. The feminine hygiene bill probably won't because they're claiming that it's going to cost us $1 million in lost revenue if we don't tax these items. So we'll see. Family medical leave is a great one. Senator Crawford is the one who's introducing that bill.
And she'll have to come up with a revenue stream for that.
And well, it's an insurance proposal, and it's actually self-funded.
Okay.
So it's, and she introduced this last time, and it was the same thing. Insurance self-funded, and it didn't fly. Okay. But again, things are different this year, so it's a good one to watch. The healthy pregnancies, Senator Kavanaugh brought that one up. That is LB 690 again. Okay. That happened because she discovered, and a number of us discovered, that women who are incarcerated are being shackled during labor.
Yeah, that's not a great,
an
optimal thing to do.
Yeah. And this is a strong bill because it has teeth. If the department or if a jailer or if somebody fails to follow the protocol, then the young woman can sue. And sue for damages and the like. So that's a good thing.
Okay, terrific. And then what about the study looking at investigation of missing Native American women?
That's exceptional, and hopefully it will go through. I don't know. I don't have an A bill on that, an appropriations bill on that one, so I'm not sure what they're claiming that it will cost. But it is it's occurring across the country that they're discovering that these young ladies are disappearing and they don't know why or where or when, and so it's a good start.
Yeah, I think that's very important to find out, to delve more into that.
Yeah.
Now, I know we're going to be doing a show on redistricting coming up, but we've got several redistricting bills, and one thing that's really interesting is that 2 of them are talking about specifically using state software instead of outside software to do redistricting, and what's all that about?
I actually had to call Senator DeBoer's office to find out what that's all about because I wasn't sure. At issue is transparency and accountability. They want to, if they use state software, then they'll know who's using it. Only authorized people will be able to use it. And they want to have a public display of how the maps are being drawn. So they want it to be transparent. So it's a good thing. They want it to be transparent, they want accountability, and they want it on this particular software so that some outside entity cannot come in and mess with it.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, let me ask you about something that would surprise most Nebraskans, and that's the constitutional amendment that Senator Wayne has put up, basically eliminating slavery or involuntary servitude as a punishment for a crime, which most people do not realize is still in the Constitution of Nebraska.
Still in our Constitution, yes. We have we have a history of having weird things in our Constitution because Nebraska came into the Union in 1867. So it was right after the end of the Civil War, the Reconstruction period, when the southern states were having to basically re-up and redo their constitutions to get back into the Union. And so Nebraska was kind of, in that bunch. There's quite a bit of language in our Constitution that mirrors the language of the southern states, particularly having to do with voting. The slavery thing kind of sneaked in, and in fact we had issues trying to get our Constitution ratified because we had language about not allowing black people to vote, black men at that time.
Right.
And so it had to be reworked several times. So the language was similar to Civil War states.
Anything about the prospects of that? Hopefully we'll be able to get that on the ballot, you think?
I don't see why not, but then I've been surprised before too of things you think, well, that makes sense. So we'll see.
Okay. Any other bills out there that voters should be particularly watching out for, that the League is watching out for? I know we're meeting to talk about our priorities this weekend. So.
Yeah. The Cannabis Bill, I think, is very interesting. It was a bill where people just from all walks of life got up and talked and told their stories and told their piece, and it was gut-wrenching to hear some of them talk about that. It is her priority bill. It already has an amendment. We'll see how it goes.
And that is LB 110, which is a medical cannabis bill, not
Correct.
a bill to make cannabis legal. So we are coming to the end of our time. Thank you for sharing your time with us, Peggy. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you back at the end of the session to wrap things up. And we will put a graphic up letting you know where you can go online to get information to follow bills. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm MaryLee Moulton, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues, and at election time, go vote Omaha. Thanks very much.